Well, all right, welcome back for another beer tasting. I'm Kevin with CrafTeeBeer, and I'm going to be tasting and sharing the experience with you an American IPA. Today's IPA is from Bird's Fly South Ale Project. They're in Greenville, South Carolina. They were started in 2016 by Sean and Lindsay Johnson. And this IPA says it's brewed with guava. So the can describes it as an old school meets new school in this balanced, juicy India Pale Ale brewed with Citra, Centennial, and Mosaic hops, and a touch of guava puree adds to the complexity. The Bird's Fly South Ale Project describes themselves as a progressively old school brewery. We make craft beer with a throwback approach through a combination of time-tested brewing blending methods and modern practices. We create beer that is complex, thought-provoking, and above all, delicious. Well, that sounds good. The Ale Project, we focus on farmhouse and saisons with a passion for unique sours, funky IPAs, barrel-aged brews, and a range of wild and traditional styles. And they talk, more and more about the type of beers and their philosophy for creating their beers. But they sound like, or described as an urban farmhouse brewery. The farmhouse beers or farmhouse ales originating in Belgium and France back when farmers would brew beer with the local ingredients or whatever they grew. Is that ingenuity or what? And then they would, they would ferment them with the wild yeast or yeast that they cultivated, in their surroundings. So that's where they usually got that earthy, funky flavor that's known for many farmhouse ales and sours. So if they do mostly sours, I think I read they do a lot of like Goses, Berliner Weisses, beers like that, saisons, which is a type of farmhouse ale. So a little bit of sour beers or ales, and this turns out to be one of their IPAs, so that's going to be interesting, I guess. If it's, a fruity, sour,
I like fruit,
farmhouse style IPA with the hops they mentioned, it should be fruity. Add the guava, which sometimes is described as tasting like strawberry and pear. Should be an interesting mix between that fruit and the fruit flavors that sometimes you get from those American or New World hops that they described. So it's the Bluprint. The can has a blueprint for a person's head, and the brain appears to be hops. So I would say this is a HopHead Bluprint.
Your HopHeads, they think there's something special, man.
So it says IPA at BFS Beer, 6.5% ABV. They've got a little bit of a sour, fruity, bitter scale on here. So sour, actually the sour is, the slider is all the way to the lowest point to the left. So maybe not very sour. The fruity adjustment slider is pretty much all the way to the right, maybe a 9 out of 10. And the bitterness goes on a scale of 0 to 5, and it's on a 3. So that's going to be a fairly bitter but very fruity IPA. Brewed and canned at the Bird's Fly South Ale Project in Greenville, South Carolina. 1 pint can. No date. All right. Let's build this beer according to the blueprint.
It's a blueprint.
It wants out of the can. A little bit of head surfacing out. I can smell the fruit. Had to clean that off or we would have made a mess. This is going to be a real foamy head on this. It wasn't that aggressive of a pour, so interesting. So we'll let this settle a bit. The beer that we can see is a pale gold, slightly hazy. Carbonation's going pretty well. Lots of small bubbles, which I guess are a sign of a well-done beer. As you can see, unbelievable, crazy, foamy head on this. This has been out for a little bit, but it's not that warm, and it wasn't too much of an aggressive pour, so not sure if that was intended to be that aggressive of a head, but that's what we have.
What do we have?
Looks really creamy, foamy, bubbly, big bubbles in the head. It's a pretty much white head. Carbonation is really aggressive, and again, really small bubbles. All right, let's see if we can get a nose on this through the 3 inches of ice cream on the top of this. Yep, it's the, I would say lemon zesty with a little bit of funk. Not very strong, but that's what I get. A lemon zest, funky nose. See if we can get a little more in here while we let this head die down. So good head retention as well as we patiently wait for this beer tasting.
Just wait.
Just wait.
A little bit of orange, creamy orange. Yeah, the creamy orange, like an orange ice cream. So like maybe there's a little bit of malt sweetness in there. All right, let's see if we can attempt a sip through this head. That's really like it's got one of those like foam caps that's floating on the larger bubbles. So the top has like condensed, almost like when you have a cup of vanilla ice cream and it starts to melt and the top disc stays intact and floats. That's what's going on here.
What the hell are you saying?
Interesting. Yeah, I think I get the guava. It's a strawberry citrus, like a strawberry lemony fruit. There's definitely some bready biscuit going on there. So the malt, that sweetness that I was smelling was definitely from the malt, or that's the sensation I get. So it got some bready sweetness. It's got a little bit of lemon zest and maybe that strawberry hint from the guava.
Oh, what is that? Guava? Oh.
In the container is this very light envelope of that funkiness that you get with a farmhouse. So I'm not sure what kind of yeast they used, whether this was when I think of farmhouse, I guess I think of it as wild yeast or wild fermented. I'm not sure if they use any different kind of yeast to create their beers, calling themselves a farmhouse ale project, but I get the feeling of a light envelope of that farmhouse carrying a bowl or an envelope full of strawberry, lemon, orange, and some sugary sweet bread dough mixed in there. So it is a complex beer,
in my opinion.
A little bit of a, not going to say drying, but a little bit of a tacky, maybe dry sensation is left. I can feel it on my tongue. So it's not a clean, crisp beer by any means. Yeah, it definitely leaves something behind. Like I said, it's like it leaves the envelope behind, that funky, thin veil that wrapped the whole flavor with a little bit of that stays behind, and as it stays behind, it starts to become bitter. So it's a little funky bitterness left behind after the fruit flavors and that sweetness has finished. Okay, so that's interesting and well done.
Well done.
Let's go check in on Untapped and see what this thing has for a rating. On Untapped, the Bluprint IPA from Birds Fly South Ale Project has a 3.78 star rating. 2,171 ratings, good sample size. The description on here for this beer is Our House IPA, the juicy double dry hop beer brewed with guava puree for a full flavor and complexity. Hop bursted with Mosaic, Centennial, and Citra. This balanced pint has a fresh taste and classic, slightly bitter finish. Totally got the bitter finish. That's what I ended up with, that funky bitter finish that was left behind. On Beer Advocate, the Bluprint IPA has a 3.75 rating, and that's a very good rating. Seems pretty consistent between the two sites.
Different websites.
All right, quickly jump back to Untapped. I'll check this in and we'll wrap this tasting up.
This is taking too long.
I checked this in. I went with a 3.75 rating on Untapped. It's a well done, complex IPA. That funky wrapper that I described gives it a little bit of a different twist than a lot of IPAs, so I'm really enjoying this. I gave it a description of a fruity lemon orange guava start with some bready sweetness wrapped in a funky bitter wrapper, and the finish leaves some funk bitter behind. That describes the experience, the taste that I got from this IPA. I went with the flavor profile of hoppy, juicy, funky, bread, and bitter. So another one checked in. Another beer tasting in the books. Thanks for tagging along. If you can get the Bluprint IPA, I recommend it. A little bit different. Juicy, bitter, complex, 6.5% ABV. Again, it's the Birds Fly South Ale Project in South Carolina. All right, I'm going to finish this. Until the next time, social media stuff is in the description. Hit subscribe, do all that nonsense.
Don't forget to rate us, comment, and subscribe.
Until the next beer tasting, I'm Kevin with CrafTeeBeer. Cheers.